Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we slice through a stack of sources to uncover those crucial nuggets of knowledge. Today, we're plunging into the high-octane world of Formula One, specifically the complex and increasingly troubling situation unfolding behind the scenes at Red Bull Racing. We've been digging into some really fascinating insights from recent analyses, drawing from detailed reports on respected F1 blogs and sources like The Race. Our mission today is pretty clear. We want to unpack Red Bull's persistent struggle with its second driver, and maybe more importantly, what this long-standing issue truly means for their star, Max Verstappen, and, well, the future of the team itself. Okay, let's get into it. So let's maybe kick things off with Yuki Tsunoda. He found himself pretty unexpectedly thrust into that Red Bull seat for the third race in Japan. Initial signs, seem promising to many. He's definitely shown flashes before. But what have the sources revealed about how things have gone since then?
Yeah, it's striking, isn't it, how quickly that initial maybe hope has just evaporated. The sources, they paint a really stark picture. His Austrian Grand Prix weekend, for example, was described as an ignominious new low, finishing 16th, 2 laps down. Yeah. I mean, Christian Horner called it horrible. He didn't mince words.
Ouch.
Exactly. And this isn't just about one bad race, right? It really spotlights Red Bull's core vulnerability. They are effectively a one-car team right now. Just think about the points. Verstappen's got, 155? His teammates, mainly Tsunoda now, have chipped in just 7 points combined.
Wow.
And maybe even more worrying, Tsunoda hasn't scored a single point in the last 4 races. This isn't just a driver having a tough patch. It really highlights how fragile things are when everything rests on one superstar.
That is a stark contrast. But okay, given his talent, we know Yuki can be quick. What precisely has gone so badly wrong for him? What are the underlying issues the sources are pointing to?
Well, the simple but probably frustrating answer coming from Tsunoda himself and the data is that his qualifying has just fallen off a cliff, and his race pace has plummeted alongside it. He admitted to a big pace deficit, and what's maybe most concerning is he couldn't really explain why. He felt, in his words, more lost than ever after just 9 races in that car.
That doesn't sound good.
No, and Austria was a perfect example. Decent start, then just dropped back to 16th. Then he clipped an Alpine, which meant a front wing change, losing loads of time, and got a 10-second penalty on top. The sources even point out this sort of painful irony that after the restart, he was right between cars that went on to finish in the points. Places a Red Bull should be, It just shows how far off he was.
Right. And he mentioned estimating he was about 4/10 off Verstappen's pace, even without a direct comparison. Now, 4/10, that might not sound like a lifetime to some listeners, but in F1 terms, what's the real worry there?
Oh, it's huge. This raises a really critical question about the car itself, actually. 4/10, it might sound small, but in F1, that gap is absolutely massive. It's often the difference between pole position and maybe not even getting out of Q1, or fighting for a win versus struggling for 10th.
Okay.
And what's more, Tsunoda isn't even sure where he's losing that time. It's not jumping out of the data, apparently, especially since he feels his driving style isn't fundamentally that different to Max's. He found the Red Bull car has a really narrow window, meaning it only works perfectly under very specific conditions, like a really finely tuned instrument, only a master can really play it. And the team sort of acknowledges this. They know whoever partners Max needs to accept, they probably won't be as quick, but they also have to find a setup they're confident in within that tricky window. The problem is, the car itself, while obviously incredibly fast with Max, has many vices, that's the term used, a super sharp front end, which can be twitchy, and a rear end that, quoting the sources here, only an extraordinary driver can deal with.
Extraordinary. So basically, Max Verstappen.
That's the implication, isn't it? It suggests they might have engineered a car so specific to Max's unique talent that it inherently makes life difficult for anyone else.
It's that classic engineering trade-off, right? Peak performance versus usability. Red Bull seems to have gone all in on peak.
So, a beast of a car to tame. But were there any mitigating factors for Tsunoda specifically? Anything that gives a bit more context to his struggles beyond just the car being difficult?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't exactly a level playing field for him from the start. He spent several races actually behind on car spec because of a Q1 shunt earlier on, a qualifying crash that damaged things, putting him on the back foot immediately.
Right.
Plus, you have to remember, he was dropped into that seat with very little warning, coming over from the sister team mid-season, essentially. That's a massive adjustment.
True.
And it's really worth stressing just how tight the F1 field is now. In Austria, that gap, 0.263 seconds to Verstappen in Q1. That tiny margin was enough to knock Tsunoda out in 18th place.
Wow. It shows, doesn't it? It really does. It exposes this long-standing Red Bull weakness more starkly than ever. Even tiny imperfections are just brutally punished now. And if we zoom out a bit, connect this to the bigger picture. This isn't just a Tsunoda problem. This isn't even new for Red Bull. History is, well, painfully repeating itself in that second garage.
Yes, the sources definitely highlight that. They say Red Bull has lurched from crisis to crisis with that second car ever since Daniel Ricciardo, a proven race winner, let's not forget, left at the end of 2018. And the sources even make a pretty bold claim. This whole second driver issue potentially cost them the Constructors' Championship in 2024. Which is huge, obviously, for team prestige and finances. Max Verstappen is just increasingly isolated out there in races without a competitive teammate backing him up. That's hardly ideal for fighting for championships.
Exactly. And it's a recurring theme, isn't it? We saw similar patterns with other talented drivers they tried. Think about Liam Lawson. He arguably had his strongest weekend ever in Austria, qualified and finished 6th. Really impressive for a relative rookie in that car. But he was still ditched after just 2 races in the main team.
Just 2 races, yeah.
Yeah.
Seems incredibly quick.
It suggests, well, maybe desperation or just a very, very low tolerance for anything less than what Max can do. And then, of course, there's the whole Sergio Perez saga, which is making noise again recently.
Perez has certainly been quite punchy, hasn't he? Claiming on a podcast appearance, the Spatic podcast, I think it was, that Red Bull regrets axing him, basically saying they made a mistake letting him go. And his troubles, particularly later in his time there, they do sound eerily familiar to what Tsunoda's going through now.
They really do. Perez definitely had high points with Red Bull, no question. 5 wins, finished second to Max in the 2023 championship. Strong start. He even started 2024 brilliantly, right? 103 points in the first 6 races, got that new 2-year contract. And then, well, the wheels sort of came off. He only managed a paltry 45 points in the next 16 races, a massive drop-off. He spoke pretty openly about having to drive the car with full conscious effort, like it was a constant battle, not intuitive. He even criticized the car's development direction, claiming Max didn't like it either, which is quite something for a former driver to say.
It's just a real disconnect.
Yeah, suggesting maybe a fundamental design philosophy that's just inherently difficult for almost anyone but Verstappen to really get a handle on.
So comparing Tsunoda and Perez then, does Perez's experience, his struggles, really back up his claim that the car was the main issue? Or was it, ultimately just him not performing at the level Red Bull demanded?
Well, not delivering is how Red Bull clearly saw it, hence the payoff. But the sources also stress how tough this car is for everyone. While Perez's overall stats are better, 12 points versus Tsunoda's 4 in their first 9 races, or I think it's 7-13 if you include sprints. The source specifically says it's hardly night and day when comparing their performance relative to Verstappen.
Okay, so not a huge gulf.
Not really. And crucially, Perez was let go because in Red Bull's eyes, he wasn't consistently getting the results needed in that second car. That's the bottom line from their perspective. However, it's clearly not just about blaming the driver. Verstappen himself, interestingly, has defended Perez, Lawson, and now Tsunoda. He keeps saying the core problem is how difficult the Red Bull is to drive.
He's essentially saying it's not them, it's the car.
Pretty much. He's saying, look, if it takes my specific skill set, my virtuosity, as the source puts it, to make this thing work, then you can't be surprised when other really good drivers struggle. Christian Horner often tries to simplify it, saying the car just evolved to suit Max, but the reality seems much more complex. It's a car with this incredibly narrow performance window, and seemingly only Max can consistently walk that tightrope.
Like a custom suit, as you said, that only fits one person. Which brings us, really, to the biggest, maybe most unsettling question for Red Bull. Their overwhelming dependence on Max Verstappen. He is undoubtedly an all-time great driver. But despite having a contract supposedly locked in until the end of 2028, the sources keep pointing to these persistent and frankly increasingly loud rumors about him possibly leaving. How serious should we take these whispers?
Well, what's fascinating is the amount of, let's say, substance behind the rumors this time. It's not just idle gossip. Mercedes team boss Toto Wolff has been incredibly open about wanting Verstappen, and it's gone beyond just talk. George Russell, who'd be Max's teammate at Mercedes, has publicly said conversations are ongoing between Mercedes management and people close to Max.
Ongoing conversations. That's significant.
It really is. The sources even suggest the main reason Russell doesn't have a firm Mercedes deal for 2026 yet is because they're holding out a hope Max might become available. Now, some stories about exact contract clauses might be off, but the reality seems clear. There are ways for him to leave. As one source puts it bluntly, if a driver wants to walk away, then there's always a way to do it. Performance and ambition often trump contracts at this level.
Losing a driver like Verstappen would be a massive blow for any team, just devastating. But why is it described as doubly worrying for Red Bull specifically? What makes their situation different?
It's doubly worrying precisely because of this issue we've spent all this time discussing. Their proven inability to find anyone else who can consistently get the most out of this inherently tricky car. If Max leaves, Red Bull isn't just losing their star driver. They're left with a car concept that, while theoretically fast, seems only truly unlockable by his very specific, rare talent.
And finding another driver like that.
Exactly. They don't grow on trees, especially when most other top drivers are already locked into long-term deals elsewhere. And compounding this, Verstappen himself isn't actually happy with the car right now. He wants something more competitive, something easier to drive, frankly, a wider operating window.
He's falling behind in the championship.
Right. He's a significant 61 points behind Oscar Piastri currently. And he's openly expressed doubts that Red Bull's planned upgrades will be enough to truly challenge McLaren, let alone fight back properly. He even said recently he's not thinking about the championship right now, that they need big steps. That's not the language of a driver feeling confident in the tools he has.
And there's that historical angle, too, casting a shadow over all this, the departure of their legendary designer, Adrian Newey. How does that fit in?
It definitely fits. Sergio PEREZ, for one, has openly blamed Red Bull's current struggles partly on Newey leaving last year. Now, the timeline's a bit nuanced. Reports suggest Newey felt increasingly marginalized before he officially left, and maybe his direct day-to-day influence had already reduced, but
his departure still matters.
Absolutely. It's a huge loss of experience, of intellectual property, of a certain design philosophy, and it makes fixing the car's current problems much harder. Making a car easier to drive while keeping it fast is, as the sources say, not that straightforward. It's a really complex balancing act, and Newey was a master at that. Without him, tackling the car's vices, as they call them, is a monumental challenge. It's not just a quick fix.
So, okay, we've looked at Tsunoda's situation, the history of that second seat, Perez's perspective, and this huge Max Verstappen wildcard. What does it all mean for Red Bull moving forward? What's the sort of bottom line here for you, the listener, trying to make sense of it all?
Well, it raises this absolutely critical question about Red Bull's long-term future, doesn't it? If Verstappen, the driver, holding this whole thing together right now, were to actually leave, Red Bull would find themselves in, frankly, a dire situation. They just haven't shown they have another driver who can consistently master this current car philosophy, especially with the driver market looking like it does. Tsunoda's struggles, Lawson's brief stint, Perez's difficulties before them. They aren't just isolated incidents. They look like symptoms of a deeper, fundamental car problem, a machine maybe designed too closely around one unique talent.
And ironically,
it's this very car problem, this potential single point of failure in their approach that might be the very thing that convinces Verstappen to look elsewhere, potentially causing the entire Red Bull house of cards, as the source puts it, to come tumbling down. It's not just about losing a driver, it could undermine the foundation of their recent dominance.
So we've taken a deep dive today into these underlying issues at Red Bull Racing. It reveals a team grappling with, well, more than just a second driver problem. It's a fundamental challenge with their car's characteristics and this maybe dangerous over-reliance on one individual.
Yeah, what we've really seen is how absolutely critical one driver's unique talent has become to this team's success, and how that dependence, while bringing trophies, also creates this huge vulnerability.
Yeah, this should be interesting.
A really shaky foundation, perhaps, for the future.
So as you reflect on all this, here's something to maybe chew on. In sports, it's all about marginal gains, about finding every last hundredth of a second. Can a team truly build sustained dominance when its success hinges so heavily, almost entirely, on one driver's extraordinary, maybe unique ability to tame a difficult car? What happens when that driver isn't willing, or maybe isn't able to perform that magic anymore, or simply decides their future lies elsewhere? What does that tell us, maybe more broadly, about any team or organization that becomes overly reliant on a single point of genius?